Hi, Christine. Thanks so much for
Hi,
being
Jenna. Thank you for having me.
See you. So we're excited that you're here to talk to me and us and all of our followers at Kiddus about cyberbullying and what's been going on in terms of how bullying has been affecting kids, how screen time has increased. I mean, there's so much that we as parents have to consider right now during this pandemic. And so we thought it would be great to sit down and really learn from the expert. So I'd love to hear if you can just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's start there.
Yeah. So I'm a psychologist, a child psychologist, and my work has been in two areas. I do clinical psychology and do therapy with children and families. And then I've also done a lot of research on bullying prevention, school-based bullying prevention. So I have a number of years of experience with this, but as you know, this kind of thing is constantly changing and evolving. So it'll be interesting to talk with you today.
Absolutely. Okay, well, so let's talk a little bit about, the statistics or general information about cyberbullying, and let's start there.
Sure. So as you can imagine, it's a little bit hard to get exact numbers, but if you review different research studies who may define cyberbullying a little bit differently, it looks like about 15 to 25% of kids, from late elementary school through high school have experienced cyberbullying, have been the victims of cyberbullying. So the numbers vary a little bit, but it's about 1 in 5 kids. And if you would expand the definition to just more sort of toxic speech or aggressive speech, the numbers would be even higher. Traditional bullying, if you include all the different categories, so physical bullying, relational, it looks like about 30% of kids experience that type of bullying. And I'm guessing that as time goes on, I mean, almost every child is online at this point. And so I think that we're going to see a shift where cyberbullying is just right up there with other types very soon, if not already.
Absolutely. So, I mean, kids are online pretty much all day is at least what it feels like right now, especially if they're at home doing online learning. And then we've seen so many articles come out to talk to parents and share information, and there's some positive and there's some negative, like everything. But the general information sort of that we're getting out of it is that it's everywhere, and kids are spending all of their time online because that's the way that they're connecting with their friends.
Right.
And so a big part of that, though, is that on one hand, it's amazing that they're connecting with their friends. And as parents, we want that social interaction, especially when so much social interaction has been taken away. But on the other hand, our kids are also so much more exposed because of the amount of time that they're spending online to cyberbullying and to kids that they may have been avoiding at school, or even strangers who are bullying them online.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really... At this point, I think a lot of parents are looking for information on how to handle this huge increase in screen time, this huge increase in gaming, and this huge increase in just time online and being exposed to all of this extra gaming.
Right. Yeah, it's such a complex issue. And regardless of what you thought about screen time before the pandemic, we've all had to re-examine what we're okay with, or just what is going to happen in our homes, because we're trying to work while they do school, while they socialize, and so that it has been extremely challenging. And I hear the full range of comments. I hear so many parents really grateful for online games. They hear their kids laughing and connecting and having a great time, and real joy is happening in many cases, right? So that is a wonderful thing about this time in history. On the other hand, if so much of their world is online and then cyberbullying is happening, that it's like the impact is that much greater, because that feels like the whole world to them. And so that's why it really is so important for parents, especially of elementary age kids. And then, it can increase as they get older, but to really be very conscientious about how you're going to limit this. And of course, every family has to figure out what can they do as far as supervision. But there's so many like types of software and apps now where you can actually schedule the devices to turn on and off. You can schedule certain apps to turn on and off. And so, it really does help kids when we are intentional about limiting their screen time so that it doesn't feel to them that that's their whole world. So that's kind of how I think about it. I want them to have access to that fun, but I also want them to still do all kinds of other activities, that use different parts of their brains, for example, or things that they have to be a little more active in creating. And so, we will wind up in conflict with our kids. They don't understand this, this has been their whole lives, basically, like pushing for video games. And so you have to get comfortable with the fact that they're not necessarily going to understand why you're limiting it. And I usually recommend to parents, don't get into a lot of debate about it. You can explain why you're doing it, but then just do it. And you can let them know we'll talk about it again in a few months, or we can revisit it, when you're a little bit older. But just really making a decision about what you're comfortable with, and then trying to help your kids. Sometimes now they need help to engage in other types of activities.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely feels that way right now.
Yeah.
So in terms of the most common issues that you see through cyberbullying, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the age. So for the kind of older elementary kids, or maybe third, fourth, fifth grade, the places where I see it happening are sometimes these kids start to get into group chats, like a group text starts for a whole fourth or fifth grade class. Maybe not all the kids have cell phones, but you'll start to see some relational aggression happening on group text. So that's something to be monitoring if your child has a phone or an iPad where they're able to do that. And kids just start to sort of make mean comments about maybe one or two kids in the class, or they may have a group chat that excludes some kids. Some kids don't care, and some kids really do feel that. And so you really have to figure out, how is your child feeling about it? And then the other big area is in the games, so in video games. So the elementary crowd is playing a lot of Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite. Those are some of the big ones. And so there's a range of ways that kids are mean in the games. And again, I just want to emphasize that some kids brush it right off and they don't really seem to care that much, whereas other kids are more sensitive and really get upset. And so that's important for all of us to know, that it can be really hurtful. So just keeping an eye, asking your kid questions about what's happening in the game and how are kids talking to each other. Some of it's online, they have headsets on, not online, out loud, they have headsets on, and some of it's in a chat, or sometimes kids are being excluded. If there's sort of like a smaller team that's formed, kids may feel excluded from that. And then I think, just all the typical online harassment and toxic speech. This goes on all the way through middle and high school. There's some very aggressive language and abusive kind of comments if you delve into some of these video games. And so it's really important to be aware of that, because I think the kids start to become hardened to it. My own kids, when I've talked to them, it's like, oh yeah, that happens, but they're just sort of, either if it's bothering them, they'll turn off their audio, or they may just sort of say to themselves, well, it's not personal to me and I'm going to screen it out. But other kids do really feel upset about it if they're more directly targeted.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also seen both sides of it, where on one hand, when it is the child's friend, they don't think too much of it. Sometimes they think, oh yeah, that's just how they talk in the games, or that's just what happens in the games, and they don't really think so much of it. And then there's other times where it feels very personal, and there's been some situations,
more of an attack.
Exactly, an attack. And then I've seen it when the kids were in school, that it was then following them back to school. And
oh wow,
really from online into real life, which really,
right, because kids are now talking about it at school.
Exactly.
And also this other issue that can happen too is if a kid is maybe not on that game, and they're hearing all the other kids talk about the game. They very much want to be a part of it, and that can be hard for parents too, to kind of stay strong and make decisions about what the kid is allowed to play or not. But I think trying to kind of find other families that have some similar choices to yours can be helpful, and then connecting your kids on games that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I know that I, with my own child, was having that same conversation with Fortnite and,
Right.
and feeling like every single child was playing. And then when I said,
Right, and it's
well,
not true.
let's talk about who's playing. And he said, well, this one plays. And I said, okay, how about this one? Oh no, he doesn't play. And I said, oh, so we're not the only family that's not in Fortnite right now. And maybe when we're a little bit older, just like you say, we can look at it. But it's a very hard thing for kids to understand. I mean, I'm sure we can all think back to when we were kids and our parents said no, except now it seems like there's so few things that kids can do compared to what they were able to do in this pandemic.
That's right. Yeah.
And no has felt so much harsher. So I'd love to talk about how parents should deal with their kids in terms of, I like what you've said in terms of, saying maybe we'll revisit it later, not making it that final no. How should we talk to our children about cyberbullying on both sides, whether or not they're experiencing, and then also that fear of if they're cyberbullying kids, or if they aren't as aware of the things that they're saying as being construed as,
I think we all need to be concerned about both sides. I think that you may not ever imagine that your child might do some cyberbullying, but I think we all need to realize there's a risk of that as well if they don't understand what it is. So I think, really, there's some great websites. Pacer.org is a good one, and stopbullying.gov that really define cyberbullying and help you show kids what it is. And we want them to understand that I think usually in the definition of bullying, we have a power dynamic, right? And it would be a more powerful kid doing something mean to a less powerful kid, whether it's socially or physically. But cyber kind of takes that to a new level. And at that point, the more powerful person is the one who has more tech savvy, or, or just, I'm trying to think what else, just by virtue of having a big audience, they may be more powerful. And so helping kids to understand that some of these mean things that are being said do constitute cyberbullying is really important, that they should take it seriously. And another great way to start talking about it with your kids is to work on their bystander behavior, right? Because they're not going to be real quick to say, yes, I say these mean things. Or sometimes they don't want to tell you that they've been the victim either, because they're afraid that you'll maybe take away access to a game. So that bystander conversation could be a great entry point, and just saying, do you see a lot of kids saying really mean things? Or in your group of friends, when you guys are playing, does anybody ever get left out? And just try to sort of specifically ask about certain behaviors that you would be concerned about, and raising your kids' awareness that that can be really hurtful. And since so much of the time that they're socializing is in the game, it's really important to think about being good citizens in there.
For sure. So like you say, sometimes your kids won't want to tell you that they've been a victim of bullying. And so what are things that parents should look out for, in addition to bringing it up? I love the idea of a bystander conversation, or, asking your kids what's being said in the game, and really, opening up the conversation about it. But are there things that parents should look out for, maybe behaviorally, or anything else that parents might notice that will give them signs that something's happening?
Yeah, and I think, these are things that you would want to look out for anyway, but I think changes in their mood can let you know, and especially if it's around the game or a certain app, social media app. And if you're noticing that they just seem more irritable, if they seem down a little bit more often, it's tricky right now, because a lot of kids are going through some more moodiness and depression just from being stuck at home so much. But just trying to notice how much it seems to relate to their time online. Another sort of red flag would be if they seem to all of a sudden stop playing a game that they love maybe, and switch to other games. That would be a little bit of I would wonder about that and want to ask some more about that. Also, if they, if you're really monitoring, you can see maybe they've changed their screen name or they've changed something about their login so that, maybe because something bad happened, they've made some changes to their account. Those would be some things to notice. Yeah, I think those are the main ones.
Yeah, no, that's all really helpful. So in terms of the pandemic and what the pandemic has done to gaming time and screen time, have you, and I'm sure it's all, all the research is just being done now, but have you yourself noticed, either with people you work with, or is it more, are you hearing more about online bullying, and is it more prevalent in your
I think we can be pretty certain that it's on the rise. As you said, the research sometimes takes a little while to kind of come back, but there are some companies doing kind of using artificial intelligence to review the content of online chatting. And they've seen a huge increase in kind of toxic speech and abusive comments. And that's on platforms like Discord or Twitter. They can analyze that, and they've seen, like a 4-fold increase in aggressive and just abusive talk. And another thing that's really concerning, and I would want to talk about with kids, is that there seems to be an increase in some racist talk also. And so just being aware that might not occur to people, that that's a part of the aggressive talk that's happening online, or even sexualized comments. And so all of these should go into the parents' decision making about what games you're letting your kids play, because even if the game itself may seem acceptable to you, trying to figure out what age group is playing this game, and what's the nature of the chatting and the comments that's going on, so that you can make a decision if you want your child exposed to that. Because we have seen during the pandemic, this increase that I'm mentioning. And it's just natural that if kids are on, there has been research that shows the more time kids are online, the more exposed they are to cyberbullying. It's just to be expected. And that increase this year is just the kind of thing that puts us at risk for it.
And are there certain games that are, there's more exposure to cyberbullying versus other games? Like you say, younger kids are playing Roblox and Fortnite and Minecraft versus older kids who are playing things like Call of Duty, things like that. Are there, is there a relation between the more aggressive the game, the more cyberbullying there is? Or do you find that games that have sort of team play, there's more cyberbullying? Or is there sort of any way to look at that to have some?
I don't think I'm able to kind of give people that kind of clear, guidance or breakdown. But I think that Call of Duty and some of those more violent games do have more violent talk. I had a kid tell me that when you get killed in Call of Duty, you have 5 seconds to say whatever you want to the person who killed you. And some horrible things are getting said at that point. So that's just an example of where the game almost invites it. That's not necessarily cyberbullying. And so that's where this sort of, it gets murky, but it is aggressive language. I would say some of the upsetting behavior can happen in most of the games where kids are like collecting things. So we see in Minecraft, people will destroy a world that a kid worked so hard on. The same can happen like with Rocket League. I heard about a kid having all of his items he was scammed and sort of agreed to a trade that went wrong, and the other person just sort of stole the items. So I really think that it can happen in almost any game. And your best defense is to learn the game a little bit with your child. Now, I assume that other people are like me, and we're so happy when the kids are occupied and we're using that time to get our work done, right? Not to sit with them and play Minecraft or whatever. But if you can set aside some time to get to know the game, that's going to really give you a better idea of how they might be taken advantage of, or what kind of mean behavior might be happening in that game.
That's all really very helpful information.
It's not easy though, is it? It's really time consuming. It takes a lot of mental energy and motivation for parents. And I'm just so aware that that is in short supply this year. So I also I don't want to, don't want to put a lot of guilt on parents about this, but if you have the resources, try to be involved in it.
I may have to play some Fortnite before I let my son play.
Right.
Experience
right.
it myself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess just, overall, you say we're going to be seeing a rise, and our best line of defense is to speak to our children and be as open and educate them as much as we can about cyberbullying and toxic behavior, because toxic behavior in games is not necessarily classified as cyberbullying. Is that right?
That is true. I mean, I think it all depends on how it affects your child, and that reminds me that I had wanted to talk about just different personality traits in our kids can make them more or less vulnerable to this kind of behavior. And what I've seen in my practice is that often the kids who are getting targeted for in-person bullying are the ones who are so reactive. They just are easily angered and may make a grouchy comeback, and then the bully knows that's a kid I'm going to get a rise out of. And so, if you have that kind of a kid, then they're going to be kind of vulnerable to it online as well, because they may send a quick message back, that they're, irritated or aggressive. And so really trying to know your child and how they might be vulnerable is really important. And likewise with that issue of, are they sensitive to these comments, or do they really just brush them off? That's interesting to try to figure out with your own kids as well.
So in terms of tips of, speaking to our children, if they are experiencing cyberbullying, in terms of telling them how to respond and what to do, you said tell them to mute, and we've heard that before, that's definitely the first step of something that you should do, or block someone in the game if that's a possibility. But are there any other things? It sounds to me like we should be telling them, don't be quick to respond and don't be too reactive. So what else
I think that is important. It's important, but the very kids who need that advice have trouble with it. But if you're working with it across different aspects of their life, that's good. So too, you hear kids joke about raging in the game, right? So something frustrating happens and they throw their controller. That just sort of shows you how activated their brains are with these games, and so it is very hard to get them to stop and be thoughtful. So I think it's great to kind of practice and talk ahead of time about the idea that if someone does something awful to you, if someone does something aggressive to you, just step away for a few minutes, or at the very least stop yourself from responding in the game, because usually that just exacerbates it and makes it worse rather than kind of bringing it to a close. It's going to just sort of like create some back and forth. That's not going to be good. So I do encourage them to kind of take a break, just even if you just sit on the couch and put your controller down for a minute or two. What else? I think getting support from your friends, whether it's in the game or right afterwards, and asking your friends for support too, if somebody's feeling left out, trying to have those conversations and just say, hey guys, what can we do differently? Because that was really lame. I'm sure I'm not talking like kids do, but
but break it in for sure.
Just kind of like modeling for your child, how could they have that conversation, and practicing it with them, because they don't always know the right way to approach a conversation like that. And so practicing with them can make it more likely that they'll do it in that heat of the moment.
Well, I think that you provided so many wonderful tips, actionable tips that parents can take. This has been really informative. So thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me.
You're so welcome. Yeah, it's been fun.
Thanks so much.
Okay.